All right, so I was just reading how the Trump team is really increasing the volume and intensity on its ground game in the state of North Carolina. And here until just recently, I thought there was no ground game here in the swing state of Michigan where I live. None. And then I heard a knock on my door here last week, and a guy stopped, and he had this in his hand. For those of you watching on the live stream, for those of you on radio, it's a door hanger. And it says, Michigan Patriots, Donald Trump needs you now more than ever. You can save America by making a plan to vote early or absentee today. By the way, today is the first day of early mail-in voting in Michigan, 40 days until the election today, which means if you requested a absentee mail-in ballot, you can get that today. You can drop it in a drop box. You can mail it. You can do however. But today, voting starts in Michigan. But the point about the door hanger here, the Trump team I've never seen anybody from in 16 or 20. I've never seen anybody show up at my house before. Here they are. Dr. Steve Turley is joining me. He's a recognized international speaker, scholar, a man who's amassed more than 1.2 million subscribers on YouTube, which, by the way, is pretty hard to do. He's got 15 million podcast listeners and millions across platforms like Rumble and Twitter, and glad to have you here. Doctor, thank you for stopping in.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, you got to deliver Michigan for us, man.
I'm doing the best I can. So here it is, though. A door hanger, a guy knocking on my door. That's new. And so when they say Trump's got no ground game, I'm going to say I don't believe that, because there's something else that's going on in Michigan. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't. 10xvotes.com. 10xvotes.com is this deal. You can go online, put your name in, and then you can find your friends, neighbors, relatives, and you can put their name in what county they live in. You can find out if they voted. So if there are people that believe like you, but say, oh, yeah, I love Donald Trump, and then you find out they haven't voted, you can call them for the next 40 days and say, hey, Bob, hey, Sally, have you voted yet? I know you love Donald Trump. And it's 10xvotes.com, giving them a shout out here in Michigan. Again, Doctor, go ahead.
That's awesome. Yeah, we're seeing the ground game, something akin to that in Virginia. We've been seeing that now for the last week.
Good.
All of the Glenn Youngkin, this was so key to his winning in 2021. All the deep red counties and congressional districts that voted for Trump 60, 70%. They're coming out and voting in mass. They're totally overwhelming the 5 major congressional districts that are blue, that are hardcore blue, for the exception of Fairfax. In fairness, Fairfax is about 400% turnout where they were in 2020. But you have a couple of deep red counties that are 500% turnout. And most of the blue counties are under where they were in 2020. And now we have stats that show that 20% of those voters who are voting in the deep red counties and districts are first-time voters. They are no propensity voters. So you got low propensity and no propensity voters, voters who haven't voted at all or have only voted maybe once in the last 4 elections, and we're seeing that they are overwhelmingly pro-Trump, and it's largely because in the end they're working class voters,
right? The economy,
working class voters. Yeah,
the economy is driving them. Now you probably saw this this was remarkable to me. Never in my life, Steve, have I seen this before. But Gallup put out their top 10, issues, and number 1 is how you identify. Are you a Republican or a Democrat? Never in my life have Republicans come out on top of the survey ever. Today, Republicans 48, Democrats 45, a 3-point lead, and that's from Gallup. And that tells you if that turns out to be true, this election is going to be very lopsided. You saw that. Do you give it credibility?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. So they have a pretty stellar track record. Gallup doesn't poll presidential races anymore, but they do poll, just like you said, voter identification, self-identification. What they found is that there is a very consistent 1-to-1 correlation between what the voter identification is for the electorate and how much the winner wins, by what margin. So in 2008, it was an 8% advantage for Democrats in terms of voter identification. Obama won by 7% of the vote.
7.9. 7.9. Yeah, exactly. It was almost exactly 8.
And you can do it back at 2016. It was about a 2% Democrat advantage. Hillary won with a 2%. Hillary won the popular vote by
2.1. That's correct.
Exactly.
So if they're close, even if it's a Republican lean by 2 points, That means that Virginia, which, by the way, back to Glenn Youngkin, your comment about Glenn Youngkin, he's been saying from the mountaintops for weeks now, Virginia's in play, Virginia's in play. And they're like, well, maybe it is. I thought the entire election season that Virginia would be in play because of him and because of the machine that he has built on the ground. That ground game in Virginia is real, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. And no one has the power to turn out the vote quite like Trump. Youngkin was able to do it, and we're now seeing Trump do it. And if Virginia is this close, he doesn't even have to win. If Virginia is this close, forget North Carolina for Kamala, because North Carolina often votes by double digits to the right of Virginia. And if it's this close in Virginia,
I want to visit North Carolina for a minute.
Forget Wisconsin.
They vote.
They all, and I would say even Michigan, because they all vote to the right of Virginia.
They do. I want to talk about North Carolina for a moment here. Trouble with the candidate for governor. So ongoing trouble with the candidate for governor, right? So I've got friends and relatives in North Carolina, and I said, what's going to happen in North Carolina? I said, well, we voted for Cooper. He's a Democrat and supported Trump in 2020. Doesn't matter. They will split their ballots. They will vote Trump. They voted for Trump in 16 and 20. He said North Carolina is not going anywhere. It might only be 1.5 or 2 points, but North Carolina's in the red column. I take that as gospel because they have elected a Democrat governor in the past and still voted for Donald Trump. They voted for him twice. They're not going to abandon him third time around. Thoughts?
No, I think you're absolutely right. Democrats in North Carolina are sui generis. They're very unique. They do tend to vote Republican. They're just they're old school Southern Democrats who just never changed their voter registration. And Democrats, unfortunately, in North Carolina know that. So they pivot to the right in all elections. So they have no problem voting for Trump as president and then the Democrat as governor. They did it, like you said, they did it in 2020. They'll do it again.
I agree with that. So as you size this up then, what do you see if you were going to make a prediction today? For all that it's worth, Steve-O, because my predictions are worth the same as yours. For all that it's worth, what would your electoral college be today? Because if Trump wins the popular vote, Jenny barred the door, But
all bets are off if he wins the popular vote. But
let's say Kamala wins the popular vote by a point and a half, which she could. Point and a half for Kamala. What's the EC?
I'm seeing 312. I'm putting Nevada in his column. So what is that? That's 6 more.
That's 312. That's 312. That's correct. Nevada has yet to vote for Trump, but they now have a Republican governor. They have people there that don't want to pay taxes on tips. They have a lot of retirees that don't want to pay taxes on Social Security, and a lot of people working overtime building the Vegas Strip. Right? They don't want to pay taxes on overtime either. Right? So, and not to mention when Kamala's asked about her plans, she doesn't have any. Steve, sit right there. I mean, if you saw the interview yesterday, what a train wreck.
Stephanie Rule, Stephanie Gruel, I think we should
Stephanie, who is a partisan progressive. I mean, she is. Anyhow, Dr. Steve Turley, hold the seat right there. We've got more to come after the break. You remember tonight on Real America's Voice from 8 until 10, I'll sit down with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and talk about how he was treated in the primaries, quite poorly, but more importantly about his support of Donald Trump now and his Make America Healthy Again movement. The green hats are out. Does that have an impact on the outcome of the election? We'll ask Dr. Turley about that after the break. Look, there's some things we don't have in Michigan where I live. Those things include hurricanes, earthquakes for the most part, giant wildfires, mudslides. We don't have that. We have winter, which is fine, but we don't have all those other things. That's why when this hurricane popped up on my radar yesterday, they're like, well, you haven't heard about this? I've got people in Florida and no. Anyhow, Hurricane Helene just minutes ago upgraded to a Category 2. It's a Cat 2 storm now. They say by the time it hits the Big Bend area of Florida, which is basically, it's headed right for Tallahassee right now. It's going to drive right through Tallahassee, right up into Atlanta. It could be a Category 4 with 150-mile-an-hour winds. It is a beast. I advise anybody that listens or watches the program down there, please be safe. Don't be a fool with your life. Continuing now with Dr. Steve Turley. Doctor, tonight, as I mentioned to you, and people know that I'm going to have this 2-hour conversation in front of a live audience in East Lansing, Michigan, with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And he, I mean, other than Donald Trump, I don't know anybody that's been treated worse than he has been in the last year when it comes to politics. at least he hasn't been shot at yet, right? And we have massive security for tonight. It's unbelievable the security these guys bring in. But I want to talk about Make America Healthy Again. I think, look, there's a lot of things with RFK Jr. I don't agree with, but there are some things that I'm like spot on with. Look, we got a lot of people that have, obesity issues, diabetes issues, hypertension, heart disease. I mean, we are not a healthy lot, Doc. And I like where he's going with this.
I do too, and I think it's indicative of this broader political realignment that's happening. So when we think of politics, we generally think of the political divide horizontally, left versus right, conservatives versus liberals, Republicans versus Democrat. But what we're seeing with the growing populist movement is it's a recalibration of that political divide away from the horizontal to the vertical. So now it's the people versus the political class. It's the rulers versus the ruled. It's those who are getting vaccinated versus the vaccinators, as it were, and the mandators, as it were. And what we're finding is that there is a populist left that overlaps dramatically. I'm thinking of there was a Kamala moment when she was talking about the Venn diagrams. I like how the circles overlap. Sorry, that's just went through my head. That where the populist left and the populist right totally overlap. The Jimmy Dores of the world and so forth, who recognize that we're living in a society that benefits the affluent and the powerful at the expense of the people's values, interests, and concerns. So for me, let's team up. Let's create the biggest, broadest people's coalition imaginable. Let's take down the establishment. Then we can spend the next 20 years hashing out our partisan differences.
It's interesting because you have Tulsi Gabbard, obviously ran for president as a Democrat. You've got Robert F. Kennedy Jr., ran for president as a Democrat, both leaving the Democrat Party, supporting Donald Trump, going on the road for Donald Trump. In fact, on Saturday here in Michigan, RFK and Tulsi are doing individual events. And I'm going to guess they're doing that around the country as well, right? So they're on the road stumping for Trump and Vance and for this country, really. And the Democrats are like, we've got all these Republicans who are not going to vote for Donald Trump. And I'm like, you got Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney, who gave us the Patriot Act, which at the time I might have thought was a good idea. Worst thing that ever happened to America was the Patriot Act. Because
I was the same way.
It gave the government a blank check to look at you, me. Hey, I don't like the way you put your front door on. You're being arrested. Now we'll kick your door in. We'll do whatever we want. I mean, the Patriot Act is an abject disaster,
and the irony,
right?
Steve, the irony is, note, it was Republicans who largely they pushed and passed that act that's now being used against Republicans.
Yeah.
So it just
they're clubbing us like a harp seal, which is sorry for the harp seals. But the fact of the matter is, I think that, so I've talked to some people, but to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., all right? So he has this following. And you saw in the polls, 5, 10, sometimes it would hit the double digits. He has people that respect what he has to say about vaccines, about health care, about the health of the country, about the future of telling the truth, and that, these giant pharmaceutical companies should not be allowed to just do whatever they want and never worry about being sued. And I think a lot of people agree with that. I think on the fringes, he might mean a point or two in places like Pennsylvania or Michigan. Of course, the Democrats sued to take him off the ballot in Michigan. Then they sued to keep him on because they care about democracy. Right.
It is. Talk about, again, the weaponization of the system. It makes you do this. Yeah, no, I think you're right. We've got the data that shows about 60% of his voters, his hardcore base, are ready to vote MAGA. About 2% will vote for Kamala, and 2% are sitting out, or they might vote for Cornel West if he's available.
What did you say the hardcore numbers were? What was the hardcore
60%,
number?
60%, 6 and 10.
Yeah, 6 and 10. So if he, let's say, and I think he probably had 5% in Michigan.
5%, so we're talking a 3% uptick, yeah.
Right, and that's the ball game. That's the ball game. Now, the problem is the Democrats gamed the system. They left his name on the ballot.
They only have themselves to blame.
Well, they hope that they can, siphon off a few votes and win. But the other problem the Democrats have, they also sued to keep Jill Stein and Cornel West off the ballot. They failed both those times. So all those people are on the ballot. And remember, Hillary and her team still blame Jill Stein. Doctor, I'll give you the last word.
That's right. They sure do. Well, I mean, when all's said and done, the state of the race is It's very simple, really. We've got 3 data points. We've got the polls, we've got voter registration, as you pointed out with Gallup, and we've got the early voting. In all 3, it's all swinging Trump's direction. That's the pattern. It doesn't matter what poll you look at. Doesn't matter. You could cherry pick all you want. Trump is stronger in that poll than he was in 2020, and the Democrat is weaker against him in that poll than they were in either 2016 or 2020. So things are looking really, really good. Again, anything can happen. As you said, 40 days.
That's right.
Right now, I'd much rather be on Team Trump than the fledgling Team Kamala.
Dr. Steve Turley, I greatly appreciate you being here. To my friends in Michigan, get your ballot. Get in early. Run up the score. Polls, voter registration, early voting. He's right about the trifecta. Doctor, thank you. We'll talk again soon.
Thanks so much, Steve.
Greatly appreciate it. There it is, Dr. Steve Turley. All right. I'll take a break here. Remember, Michigan, you got to vote, you got to vote, you got to vote. I'll be back with sports in a moment.